समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
I don't know if you've been caught up in the rains recently, but nearly everybody else has. If you live in Delhi, NCR, or Gurgaon in particular, you will know that the sole subject of conversation for the last few days has been waterlogging and the chaos caused by the rains. But it's not just a Gurgaon problem. The Gurgaon was particularly bad because it is probably the worst managed and worst administered urban conglomeration in India. Even though Gurgaon was so bad, the rest of India never actually has it easy. In Gurgaon, you've seen the videos and the pictures of rows and rows of cars not moving at all, people taking 6 hours to get home in a journey that would normally have taken 20 minutes. But for the people of Gurgaon, I've got news for you. You're not the only ones to have gone through this. It happens to nearly every major city in India, and sometimes even in smaller towns, B-class centers, as we used to call them, C-class centers. Ask me. I'll tell you what happened to me. Way back in 2005, I nearly died in one of these situations. It happened this way. I was working in the Hindustan Times office. I had to go back to my hotel, which was the Grand Hyatt in Bandra Kurla in Bombay. And it wasn't, I thought, going to be very difficult, but it started raining. So I went and I said, it'll be okay. But the rain came down with such ferocity that halfway through, I realized that there was no way my car was going to make it. We still tried, but ultimately we came upon a wall of blocked cars, cars that were floating away, cars that were stuck in the rain. So I got out and I walked. And usually, and it's got it's got uphill and downhill. It's a sort of elevated road thing. So I thought we should be okay. There should be some high bits. I was wrong. As I kept walking, it kept raining and the water level rose. It sort of got to my ears and I was able to breathe basically by walking or tiptoe or keeping my nose up in the air. It got worse. And by the time I reached the Grand Hyatt and I turned in, the water was, if I just not gone on tiptoe and not to bed, till about here. Cars were floating, people were stuck in cars. There was chaos. People trying to find ways of avoiding drowning. I was very lucky I got away with it. If it had been my hotel, had been another 10 minutes away, I don't think I'd be doing this here just now. But 400 people died in Mumbai that day. God knows how many houses were destroyed, how many cars were lost or drowned or sunk. It was a really, really bad day. So I always think that no matter how bad Monday was in Gurgaon or whatever, hardly anything has been that bad that 400 people should die in one day. But when I thought about it, I came to various conclusions. Here are some of them. One is that the rains and the flooding is the great leveler. As we do this, there is chaos in Punjab. There's floods, hundreds of people have died, thousands have been rendered homeless, and there's chaos in Gurgaon, which is just so incredibly expensive to live in. The problem with modern India is that when the weather goes bad, when something unplanned happens, nobody can cope, not the rich, not the poor. This often takes the rich by surprise because earlier they used to read headlines or even news items about so and so killed in landslide or flood destroys village, and they look at it, turn the page and look at the other news. You can't do that any longer, not in this century, because the rains are such that nobody is immune to their effect. Maybe we won't die, maybe middle class people like you and me will have it marginally easier. Maybe poor people will suffer more. In fact, I'm pretty sure they will. But it will affect us all. That was the first thing that struck me. The second thing that struck me, and it struck me that day in 2005, 20 years ago, when I nearly drowned, was that, until then, and particularly in that year, climate change had just been a sort of buzzword. But it struck me that it was no longer a buzzword. It was real. It was here. We were going to get more rain. We were going to get it with greater ferocity, greater velocity, and we would have to learn to cope. It's a lesson that many cities around the world have discovered they have to cope with. And most cities have done something or the other to cope with deluges. Not India. Even though we know this climate change, even though we know that there will be flooding, nobody has done anything differently. There are no preparations. We have exactly the same attitude of flooding in 2025 that we had in 1825. We just don't bother because none of the urban planners are far-sighted enough or care enough to realize what's happening. That was the second thing I discovered that day. The third was that nearly every time there's flooding, a lot of it, of course, is to do with nature. The floods come from God or from wherever. But a lot of what goes wrong has to do with India's politicians. Let me explain that to you. Generally, whenever there's flooding, whenever there's huge amounts of waterlogging, it's probably a symptom of a political sin committed a long time ago. I'll give you the example of that day in 2005 when I nearly drowned. I was working for the HT then, and we researched it, and we discovered what had really happened. Where my office was, where the hotel, the Hyatt Hotel was not far from the airport. And when they built the new airport terminal, there was a small river, not much of a river, that ran near the airport called the Meठी River. And to build the terminal, they had diverted the course of the Meठी River. At the mouth of the Meठी River were mangroves, and those mangroves served as a natural barrier against water flooding or whatever. They removed the mangroves. They just concretized everything. So what happened that day when there was a lot of rain was that the Meठी River, which, like most rivers, would seem unimpressive in the winter and are rarely in full force during the monsoons, the Meठी River flooded its banks. What we saw was not just a flood, not just a river coming out and getting us all. It was also the Meठी trying to rediscover its original course, the way it should have been. So the reason 400 people died was not just the rains. It was because politicians had interfered with nature. They had thought they could shift the course of a river, build more buildings, it wouldn't matter. Well, that day we realized it did matter. And now when you see waterlogging, if you look closely enough, you will discover that there's nearly always a political sin at the root. They have sanctioned construction in areas where it shouldn't be sanctioned. They have stopped water from flowing out because there are built-up areas. They've allowed slums to come up and stop in the flow of water in areas where politicians need the voters from those slums. They've blocked off drains by allowing construction to come in. And when construction happens, people who do the construction have no civic sense. So they take what we call malba and they block it on the roads. And again, drains are blocked. So essentially what happens then is that the bribes that were paid to politicians to have land that was not meant for construction desanctioned so you could have construction, politicians who were allowed to become slumlords and have people living there on areas that should never have had any habitation. Because politicians have always accepted money to allow construction and slums and all of that without any effort to see what it would do to the city, we pay the price. The water never stuck or remained this waterlogged, say, 50 years ago. But the ways in which it could go out have now been blocked. And they've nearly always been blocked because some politicians have been paid off to allow some kind of construction somewhere. That was the third thing I discovered. The fourth was that it isn't just corruption. It's also indifference. It's also ineptitude. It's also carelessness. I'll give you an example. Every year before the monsoons, regardless of which city you live in, you will have seen uh, statements from the chief minister, from the municipal commissioner saying that we have conducted a huge desilting operation. The drains are clear. This year there will be no problem with the monsoon. And then you're all pleased. And then it rains for the first time heavily. And of course, the roads are waterlogged. Now, when that happens, surely you would ask, what happened to the desilting? How come the drains didn't work? Well, the reason the desilting didn't work is because it's usually carried out by municipal officials who do it half-heartedly, who are indifferent to how it's done properly, and they don't really mind being so indifferent or casual because they know no one's going to find out. There is simply no accountability. You can search high and low, you'll find very few cases where there has been waterlogging because the drain is clogged and they get hold of the municipal guys who were supposed to have desilted and ask them, hey, what happened? Nobody loses their jobs. Nobody's even made to answer for what is happening. So it isn't just the corruption of politicians, it's also the way in which municipal officials, administrative officials work. A lot of them are corrupt. A lot of them take smaller versions of the bribes that politicians take. But even those who are not corrupt really don't care. I'll give you another example. 2 weeks ago, there was a huge traffic backlog on the way to the airport in Delhi. You probably read about it, even if you weren't caught up in it in the way that I was. What had happened was that there was an underbridge, and that area was flooded. Everybody from the police to the local citizens tried to call the PWD department, call the municipality and say, can you get someone to clear the drains? Nobody turned up. They said, we don't have the staff. So there is a complete aversion to taking any responsibility, and there's a complete aversion to assigning accountability. They just don't care. I came to more conclusions. One of them was, we actually don't notice these sort of time bombs on the roads. How often have you gone down a road, even a newly built road, and discovered that it's full of potholes? I don't think you realize then that ultimately when the rains come, these potholes are going to be full of water. It's going to be impossible for you to take your car through the potholes. What's going to happen is if the road is this big, the pothole will take up this much. There will be a narrow strip at the edge and all the cars will have to go through that. That accounts for many of the jams you see. Why are there potholes? Same thing. Corruption, lack of accountability. Contractors are in league with municipal officials who are in league with politicians. Very bad roads are built. They collapse in no time at all. And nobody cares. The same contractor will get his contract to build the same road again when they want to redo it. And he will get various contracts to build new roads. That's not just to do with waterlogging. That's a malaise of our times. Why do so many tunnels built at great expense and with huge publicity flood? Why do so many bridges crack? Why are so many new highways, well publicized again, full of potholes? Because that's the way things work in our new India. Corruption was always there, but rarely has it been so much in your face. Rarely has there been less accountability. Rarely have the crooks got away with so much. And rarely have we citizens, in terms of road transport at least, had to pay such a heavy price. And there's a final conclusion I came to, which is that if you remember that 2005 deluge in Bombay, it was so bad that the airport turned into a lake. Flights were cancelled. I was stuck in my hotel room for days because we couldn't get out. People were angry. People were livid. But here's the thing, they forgot. It's the same here. It's the same in Bangalore, in Chennai, in any other city that's gone through this. People get very angry in the moment, but they don't really remember. When election time comes around, they don't say, these guys are crooks, they can't build roads, they can't even handle traffic. Look at the way in which we had to suffer on those days. They forget about it. They go to the voting booth and they vote on the basis of religion, of caste, or what they perceive as the national interest. Nobody actually votes on the basis of governance. Nobody cares about the whole business of accountability. Forget about that. They say, we're going to vote in the national interest. This is what India needs. Well, actually, you know what India needs? India needs honest politicians who do their jobs. And we say that. We say that now in conversation. But when it comes to elections, we forget that. And politicians know that. So now, when we're complaining, when I'm doing video blogs like this, and we're all writing articles, politicians look at us, they laugh, and they go back to counting their money. They know it doesn't make any difference. Ultimately, when the time comes to vote, we'll forget all of this and we'll vote for them again. So as bad as things are, don't forget, ultimately, it's not corrupt politicians and municipal officials who are incompetent or dishonest who are to blame. It's you and me. If we had asked for accountability, if we ask for accountability even now, if we hold politicians responsible for the kind of governance we deserve and which they don't give us, they won't do it. But we don't, do we? We'll go back and we'll vote for exactly the same guys, and all of this will happen once again.